And so many people think that change is hard. And yes, change can be hard, but hard doesn't mean bad. Well, hey there, my friend. Welcome back to the podcast. This is the Jennifer Allwood Show. Gonna have a little two-part series here. And so today is part one of Duh. I just went from English to French. Be impressed. Okay, so it's part one. And I'm talking about change. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about why we hate change in part one. And then in part two, I'm going to be talking about like ways that we play it safe, especially in business, and how we can almost like trick ourselves into making changes if we need to be making changes. Again, this is for life or business, but especially for business. All right. And so, you know, as a business coach who has been coaching for over a decade now, going on 25,000 women that I've coached in different capacities. I still have, 15 women at any given time who are in like my private Voxer coaching. So I'm talking to these women, some of them daily. I feel like I have a pretty good pulse on the economy for small businesses. Um, in terms of like how sales are going, challenges, at the moment, et cetera. And the truth is, the economy is doing a number on a lot of small businesses. Um, and so, if we're looking at having a real conversation about the economy, about things like tariffs, um, and what's going on in the online space, especially, um, it has become really apparent to me that there's just a lot of small businesses who are needing to make some changes. Okay. And what's hard to do, I think, for so many women is to know that you need to make changes. Maybe you're not exactly sure what you need to make changes to, but you know that there needs to be a change. But the truth is, so many people just hate change. Okay. So I was even talking the other day, I was talking to one of our clients. Her name is Renelle. And Renelle has a business where she essentially is like, she does door hangers. You guys know what I'm talking about? Like, they hang on your front door and they're hand painted. And her business is called Creations by Renelle, if you want to go look her up, Ranello. So Renelle and I and Nell and McKinsey, who are on Team Allwood, we're all having a conversation in our Voxer thread where I do my private coaching, just about like shows that Renelle has coming up, different shows she was going to be attending, and the attendance at shows that she's recently been to. So Renelle was basically saying like she's been to some shows recently where the foot traffic is just down, which I think is really a sign of the times right now, because I do think that there are just people are holding their pocketbook closer to themselves. And for, a lot of people, it's just what's necessary at the moment and also what's wisdom. So she was just talking about how a couple of the shows that she's been to recently have not had the same foot traffic as what they have in past years. And she's also noticed that there has been a shift with what she is selling, and that where she used to sell mostly door hangers, and again, those are the hand painted signs in front of her doors. Now she's selling mostly door hangers that are like, she calls them truck inserts. So they're hand painted things of like the back end of a truck, and they've got like the truck's name, and you can insert like, different things into the back of the truck. They're really cute. They're a lot pricier than her door hangers. And so we were having this whole conversation about, okay, it used to be that her business was, focused on one thing and all the money was coming from one thing. But she's noticed the shift where even though there is maybe less traffic, it shows that she's still making the same amount of money, but it's selling something different that has a higher price tag. And so we were having conversations about, okay, should she go ahead and like completely shift her focus? And, I'm not going to divulge that entire coaching conversation because, she may still have some decisions she wants to be making, but just a lot of industries are shifting. And I can tell you with 100% certainty, I told Jason, my husband, back in October of 2023, that the online coaching space is really shifting. And so for those of you that are coaches, consultants, teachers of any kind in the online space, there has been a definite shift from 2020 and then to 2023. And so here's essentially what I've seen happening online. Okay. COVID was just the most awful thing ever for so many people. It was tragic. People got sick. People died. Our kids were out of school. There was no prom. There's no graduation. It just, my 12 city book tour was canceled. Like in so many ways, it was awful. Okay. Awful. But one of the best things that ever happened to like the online coaching space was the fact that COVID happened because everybody was at home. And so everybody was having the time to spend doing in, being coached in the online space. There were so many of us who are business coaches who were out there going, hey, if ever you want to have an online business, now is the time. So in droves, people were, signing up. I think 2022 or 2023. Um, that, for us here in my coaching business, it was the year dreams are made of. It was really, really good. Okay. Because everybody was at home. Everybody wanted to know how they could make extra money. And so many of us taught people to be coachable, to seek help in all the things, to learn a skill online, to go do it themselves. All right. So what happened though is that now there's just a whole lot more coaches in every industry. And the economy has shifted, and you've got things like tariffs happening. And I just think that selling any info products at all in the online space is just harder now than what it was in 2023. Okay. And what worked in 2023, I think for a lot of people, you saw in 2024, it just didn't work the same. And now in 2025, it's become obvious to you, okay, something's got to give. All right. And listen, I've got hundreds of friends. I'm not going to say thousands, but hundreds of friends, acquaintances, people I know who are in the online space. In 2023, I was in two different masterminds spending, what did we figure out? I was spending that year in masterminds. One was $110,000 and the other was, I think, 25,000. So, I was in two masterminds with some people who, they have big businesses, as do I. Okay. So in knowing so many people from those spaces, friends, people who do all sorts of coaching online, I can tell you there are so many small businesses that are down right now. It seems like the majority of them are down about 40 to 60% in revenue versus where they were in 2023. And what's interesting is I feel like nobody wants to talk about it. And what's interesting is when I have reached out to some people whose businesses are ahead of mine, and ask them, I've had someone go, no, everything's fine. And yet I can see them making moves and making shifts and making some changes in both their personal life and their work life that let me know, okay, well, you're making some shifts. So I would either say everything is not fine, or you see where things are headed. So you're going ahead and changing first, which is fine, right? So I think right now we're in this weird season where a lot of people either have had to change or need to change, but there are so many people that resist change even when you know that you absolutely need to and should. And so I want to talk about why we hate change, first of all, today. And then tomorrow, how you can make yourself change and make some shifts, even if you don't want to. Okay. And so when it comes to like why we hate change, we are definitely, as humans, just creatures of habit. We just really are. And most people don't like making changes to anything, whether it's jobs or homes or decor. The other day, I'm standing at the bus stop with our neighbors getting Ari on the bus, and one of their neighbors was getting their house painted. And so my neighbor says, oh, it looks like they're painting their house the exact same color. And I'm like, you know what? But here's the thing, like, I don't understand that because I'm somebody who actually loves change. I love change. I said to Jason the other day, like, you're the only thing that I've kept around for a long, long time. Everything else, and my big hair, everything else I'm changing. I love change for the most part. With this person in the neighborhood, they had a beige house and they were repainting their house in the same beige color. And on average, people repaint their house about every 7 years. And so I'm thinking to myself, you're going to have the same house color for 14 years. Like, why? Why would you do that? I need a whole nother podcast episode on that. But the truth is just people hate change. And I'm going to tell you one of the reasons they hate change so much. Okay. So I saw this tweet from Alex Hormozy. It is almost 3 years old. I saw it on Twitter and I screenshot it years ago and I ran across it on my phone the other day and it's perfect for this podcast. Are you ready? So Alex Hormozy tweeted back in 2022, most people hate change more than they hate losing. So they lose. Okay, let me read that to you again. Most people hate change more than they hate losing, so they lose. That is deep, friends. That is really stinking deep. And then there was somebody named David Morris under that particular tweet that made a comment that I was like, ooh, ding, 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 ding. And here's what he said. He said, it's loss aversion. It's loss aversion. It's all about loss aversion. Even if the bird in your hand is a crappy bird, it's the bird you know. Change, even if the odds of success are 98%, still gives you a 2% chance that things won't work out and one wonders if they will be worse off than before. Okay, are you ready for me to read that? Loss aversion is what you're talking about here. Even if the bird in your hand is a crappy bird, it's at least the bird you know. Change, even if the odds of success are 98%, means there's still a 2% chance that things won't work out. And one wonders if it will be worse off than before. So I honestly think that most people view change as a risk. And if you're having a hard time making shifts, pivots, changing the way that you pay people, changing the way that you hire people, if you're having a hard time letting people go, if you're having a hard time, hiring a new person when you know you need to, like, part of it is because so many people view change as risk. And so what then we're really talking about is, in my opinion, not loss aversion as much as just risk aversion. I think two questions you need to ask yourself if you're having a hard time making changes is this: how willing are you as a person to take risks, and what's your risk tolerance? Okay, so let's talk just for a second about risk tolerance. So here's the definition of risk tolerance. Risk tolerance is how comfortable are you with uncertainty? And how comfortable you are with uncertainty is based on a couple of different things. Okay, so your risk tolerance is based on your personality, your past experiences, your background, your upbringing, your value system, who you have talking in your ear, how much being a people pleaser is, something that you subscribe to. And so when you talk about risk tolerance, like, people with a high risk tolerance in business, they are more open to launching a new product. They are more open to shifting their business model. They are more open to taking really bold actions. And so I promise you, every single person that you see on the internet whose business looks like they are really making it, they have a higher risk aversion than others. They just do. Because other people without that high risk tolerance, they have like the opposite of that. I think I just said that backwards, by the way. I think I said it backwards. So if so, we're just going to keep rolling here. But people with a low risk tolerance, they really, really prefer stability, and they prefer predictability, even if it means that a lot of times they're missing out on a lot of growth or potential to make more money, or, a whole slew of things. And so when talking to some of my girlfriends, some people that Jason and I are friends with, they have told me, Jennifer, you have a really high risk tolerance. And I think probably in a lot of ways, even higher than my husband. And I'm like, are you sure? Because stability and safety is one of my number one core values inside of my marriage, with my friendships, with my team. Like, I really need stability and safety. That is a core value for me. However, I think when it comes to financial decisions and my business decisions, they're right. I do have a higher risk tolerance than a lot of people. I am willing to roll the dice on things like, we have 3 Airbnbs. I'm more likely to buy a new house than I am a new vehicle. And I just think that's weird. Um, when it comes to business, like almost 2 years ago, I decided we were going to start selling software because I knew that one of the biggest complaints or roadblocks to success for a lot of my small business owners was just that they didn't have a website, they didn't have a landing page, they didn't have an email list, they didn't know how to do any of those things, and they didn't want to know how to do any of those things. And so we started a software called Equip 360, and yes, you can go look at it, equipped, EQUIPT 360.com, which is like an all-in-one marketing software. It took over 6 months to white label the software that we were essentially white labeling into Equipped. And it was well over $25,000. And we knew it would be probably a pretty slow growth period for the first year or so. That felt like a really big risk, because it could have been one of those things that my team spent 6 months working on something and over 25K just for it to be an absolute flop, which it hasn't. However, it has not come without its, own set of challenges. And we've had to really change things in terms of like our coaching and what we're offering for training. And I'm still taking a lot of risks on this software, and we're still pouring a lot into it. And I 100% believe in it. So that still is a risk. It was a risk a lot of people thought when I closed down my painting company, The Magic Brush, in 2017. It was a risk because we were making, multiple 6 figures a year on that painting company with me working outside of the house 10 hours a week. And so many people are like, why would you do that? And so I know that I probably have a higher risk tolerance than what some of you do, and that's okay. Okay. But here's what I want to tell those of you who are business owners. All right. If you are a business owner, I believe 100% in my gut that you already have a higher risk tolerance than most people do. Because if you didn't have a higher tolerance for risk, you would still be working a 9 to 5 for somebody else. People that are terrified of change, terrified of any risk, they stay working for other people. No, no offense to them. Thank God some people do that. I just couldn't. But you've already rolled the dice on yourself, which shows me you do have some tolerance for risk. You've already chose to do something outside of the safe, like 9 to 5, PDO, 401k, and its match lifestyle. You are already wired by God to take chances and to take risks that most people never would. And so, entrepreneurs, listen, you naturally tend to act more decisively than people who are not entrepreneurs. You usually embrace failure as part of growth better than people who are not entrepreneurs. And you are wired for taking calculated risks, to a certain degree. And so if you are someone who has a higher risk tolerance and you also have like a growth mindset, meaning you're open to change, you don't see failure necessarily as a huge setback, but failure is just part of growing. Failure is part of like figuring out what didn't work. Like the good news is if you are already an entrepreneur, if you already have a higher risk tolerance, if you already have a growth mindset, like you are so wired to be able to not only endure change, but to embrace it and like run after it. You're already wired in that way. So then that leads me to the next question. Okay, so if as entrepreneurs, God has already wired us with a higher risk tolerance, and if as an entrepreneur who is really all about growth, like you know that taking risks is just part of the deal, right? And you're already wired to just take some hits with the wins, then why are we still so resistant to change? Okay. I actually have 9 reasons here, and I'll go through them quickly. I promise. But I feel a little bit like my pastor at the Rock of Casey right now, who, like, if he came and said he has 9 things he was going to talk about today, we'd instantly know as a congregation we're bleeding this into next weekend. Okay, but I promise I'm going to get through these 9 things quickly because 1 or 2 or 3 or more or whatever is going to resonate with you if you're really resistant to change right now. Okay, and I want you to figure out why, because you can't just like white knuckle yourself into accepting change or changing a business, even though you know it's necessary. Like, I really firmly believe if we as human beings would understand why we do what we do, I think I just said doo doo, but if we understood ourselves better, it would make making decisions or shifting or changing so much easier because you have to get to the root of things. Which, by the way, if you are a Christian, as I am, it's really our job to figure out why we behave in the way that we do and to make sure that our behavior and our thought life and our actions are in alignment with God's best for us. Okay. And so if you're stuck, I assure you with 100% certainty, as surely as I'm sitting here, that is not God's best for you to be stuck. It's not. He never designed for you to be stuck. Okay. So I want you to listen to these 9 things. And again, I'm going to go through them quick and figure out where is your resistance to change coming from. And then on the next episode on Wednesday, I have part 2 of this. It's going to be episode number 534, where I talk about how to force yourself to change based on the reason that you're not changing. Okay. So number 1 reason why people don't change is just the fear of the unknown. All right. Because change brings about a lot of uncertainty. And for so many people, including myself, routines feel really safe because, it's again, it's the bird in our hand that we know. However, I just want to challenge you real quick and just say so much of what we think is safe is perceived safety. People think that working for somebody else at a 9 to 5 is safer than being a business owner. Bull crap. You've apparently never been laid off then. You are no safer working for someone else. In fact, I would say you are the safest working for yourself. Okay, I just want to say that. But predictability gives people comfort, especially if you are responsible for the bills in your household. You're a single mom, or your family depends heavily on your revenue, or you have a lot of employees or a lot of clients. Then of course you don't want to do a lot of change because you're worried, about what other people are going to think. It's the fear of the unknown. What if it goes worse than what you want for it to? And so I was on Instagram the other day, and I was telling people I had 3 coaching spots open for my private Voxer coaching. And I was talking about how we decided not to do a mastermind this year, and we shut it down at the end of last year and only offer private Voxer coaching this year. It felt like it was a risk, but I also knew that it was right. And it was a risk in that the mastermind brought in over $1 million a year in revenue for me. So, yeah, a little bit risky, right? But I also knew, just like in this year, in 2025, we've got, two kiddos that are getting ready to graduate, one from high school, one from college. We have a wedding. We are moving two boys home from Phoenix next week. We are selling one of our properties in Arizona because with both boys home, we no longer probably are going to be visiting there as much, which then will bring us to purchasing another one. So that's all just in the first 6 or 7 months of this year. And so as I was looking at like our life schedule, I'm like, okay, if I do a traditional mastermind, that's going to include multiple live events in 2025. And so I'm just going to offer instead like a coaching option that is only online, that has a lot more flexibility for me and for my clients, and give them like consistent access to me. They have access to me Monday through Friday, in my private Voxer coaching clients can reach out to me. This season is just calling for a different rhythm for our family, but there is the fear of the unknown. How would people respond to that? Would people still want to do private Voxer coaching when they've been used to doing, the mastermind? And so, by the way, if you're interested in reading about that, you can go to jenniferallwoodlinks.com/private monthly Voxer. Easton, I'll have you just drop that in the show notes if you would, if somebody wants to go look it up. But it's really the fear of unknown that keeps us so resistant to change. Okay. Number two is that I think as women, we know that often change is going to involve a lot of overwhelm and a mental load that there just never seems to be a good time for. Okay. So women, we just juggle a lot. We've got the home, we've got the kids, we've got volunteering, we've got the business. It's all of the things, right? And so sometimes making a big shift feels like just adding one more thing, and that one thing could be like the straw that breaks the camel's back. Okay, I'm going to give you a good example of this. I have known for the last couple of years that I needed to make some changes to the way that we were doing bookkeeping. In particular, I knew that we needed to probably look for a different bookkeeper. However, I've had the same bookkeeper for 25 years, and friendship, loved her, etc. So I've just kept putting off the shift, kept putting off the needing to change. And then my bookkeeper, a friend, someone we've trusted for years and years and years, got sick with cancer. And so then it just felt like it was not a good time to bring up, hey, we need to do something different. So I just kept kind of kicking that can down the road. And then our bookkeeper passed away in January. And now we're in a predicament because I should have made changes long before now. But now, we're trying to kind of sort through a little bit of a bookkeeping mess, which is fine. We've hired people that are going to take care of it, et cetera. But I just was afraid of rocking the boat. And I just kept thinking there's not a good time. It's going to be overwhelming for me, is what I kept thinking, because we were in, 2022, 2023, just hammering coaching, clients and mastermind and all of the things that I was doing. And then last year when I was like, okay, I have a little bit more capacity to breathe in my schedule. Let's go ahead and make some shifts. And then it wasn't a good time for her. And I knew it was just going to overwhelm her. So because I was afraid of overwhelming either her or I didn't make any changes. And now I really wish that I had. All right. So that's point number two. Point number three, a lot of times we don't make changes because we don't want to give up control, or we're absolute just perfectionists. And we think that that is like a badge of honor. And my goodness, it isn't, friends. Whenever I see a perfectionist, I wonder what hurt or trauma they have endured. Am I okay to say that? They either have gone through some incredible hurt, some, deep-rooted trauma of some kind, or they have a fear of man based on something that is ruling their life. And high achieving women who are business owners, we really have, there's ego, there's pride on top of, all the other big feelings. And so it's understandable that like high achieving women want to do things well, and making big changes, taking risks in your business. It can really feel like you're letting go of control, or you're risking looking imperfect. And so many women don't want to do that. Point number four. sometimes as women and just business owners in general, we get really emotionally attached to the way we used to do things and the way that always worked. And, the old way of doing things was who you are. So many of us as women, we just pour our heart and our soul into our business. And then when something no longer works, it can really feel like a failure. And the truth is it's not. This is often just how God pivots us into the next thing. If everything kept going hunky dory, nobody would ever like quit doing the way things were. We'd still have blockbusters, So like things have to evolve. They have to grow and shift, including us. And so things have to shift. And so letting go is not a failure. In fact, letting go is growth. Right now, I'm looking at my friend, Adrian Richardson, who we had doing our Facebook ads for many, many years. And Adrian was taking care of Jason's Facebook ads at Fairway Finest for a long, long time. And, that's what she's an expert at. She is amazing. And in the last couple of weeks, she has started to announce on her Instagram and her Facebook that she is shifting away from Facebook ads as the go-to person in my space and getting into more life coaching. Guys, that's such a ballsy move. I'm so proud of her. She's going to crush this. But she's really letting go of the Facebook ads piece of who she was, not because she wasn't still great at it, not because, people didn't keep going to her for it, because they did. I'm telling you, she's the go-to for so many people who are at, 5, 10 million plus a year in sales. But it was no longer working for her as a human. It may have been working in the bank account, but it wasn't working for her in her heart and soul. So letting go isn't failing, it's growing. It's growing. Okay, number 5, reason people don't do it. They don't want to look foolish. They have a fear of failure. Anytime you do try something new, you make a change, you make a shift, especially if it's in the public space, which is social media. So if you're doing it on social media, it can feel terrifying. It can feel very vulnerable. But remember, like I said on the last point, just because you're trying something new, it doesn't mean that you failed at the old thing, but it does mean you're evolving. And if you're worried about, well, what are people going to think? They're going to assume that I wasn't doing well. Who cares? I mean, the truth is, who cares? They don't pay your bills. I just told you guys that we're selling a property in Arizona. And there may be people that think, oh, I wonder why they're selling that. I wonder if they're not doing well. I wonder if it didn't, rent out well. We made over $100,000 or 6 figures renting that property last year and gave that property away to 9 different families in 2024. Rentals were A-okay. And so, but people are going to perceive and people are going to assume, and you have zero control over that. So let them think what they want to. Also, let them talk about what they want to. We have a friend, Jonathan Riley, who says birds are going to chirp, and they just are. And you have no control over that. But you also don't know, they may be chirping and talking smack on you and your decisions the way it is right now. So, you're worried about failing because of what are people going to think? Well, they could be thinking things without you even shifting. Reason number 6 that people don't shift and change is sometimes people just have a really hard time letting go of the old way. And usually the old way worked until it didn't. And that can make shifting really hard because you have to change how you think about things. And sometimes we just want the good old days, right? I was just talking to you about Adrienne Richardson and her shift from Facebook ads over to more life coaching, especially for high-powered women, business women who are making big life changes. Okay. So if that's you, go check out Adrienne Richardson's social. But Adrienne used to have pep talks with me because there was a season when Facebook ads just worked like a charm. We could spend 50, 60, 70 grand on Facebook ads in a 10-day period and make, $600,000, $700,000 on a launch. And I noticed a couple of years ago, the Facebook ads were really shifting and the way that they used to work were no longer working. And I just kept going back to Adrienne. I was like, but we used to be able to put in, $1 and make 6 or 7. And she's like, I know, but Jen, those days are over. Like Facebook has changed. The ad strategy has changed. The number of people running ads have changed. People aren't running as many ads to paid products before, they're running them to freebies. And like, it just took forever to wrap my head around that because I liked the way it used to work. I liked the old way. I didn't want it to change. I wanted to go back to putting $1 into Facebook and getting 6 or 7. This putting in $1 and maybe getting back 2 for the birds. I didn't want any part of it. And so Adrian had to keep talking to me about Jennifer, like, I know Facebook ads used to crush it for you, but they've changed for everyone. And you can continue to be like obsessed and in love with the old way of doing things, or you can get on board with the new way of doing things. And that's a hard shift. It's a hard shift. So I get it. Okay. Point number 7. Sometimes people don't change or shift because they have a lot of voices around them, a lot of influences around them. You have people that work for you. You have family members. You have your mother-in-law. You have mentors. You have people telling you to don't, if it's not broken, don't fix it. You have people telling you don't rock the boat. And if you're a Christian woman, I'm going to say that sometimes the pressure is even more intense. There's more of this underlying, like, keep the peace, stay in your lane, make sure you're doing things where you're taking everybody else's feelings but yours into consideration. And like, that can feel really tough. I can remember back when I had my painting company, I did close down the Magic Brush in 2017, but I can remember telling some of my friends, that I was going to be closing down my painting company and I was going to be teaching people just how to paint online. And one of my girlfriends was like, well, wait, you're going to be charging people to learn how to paint online? Can't they already go get all that information on YouTube for free? And I was like, she's right. And then another time she said something and it was out of love and just, wanting to like talk through things with me. But oh man, it jacked me up mentally for a minute. But she said, things like, and you've been giving people away all your painting tips for free for so long. Do you really think they're going to start paying you now? And again, not from a place of malice. She's talking out of a place of love. But that influence, like I really had to get over those words where again she meant so well, but I really had to get over that because in my head I'm like, she's right, what am I thinking? I shouldn't be changing, I should be, and so if you're there because of the influence of others, like, look, I get it, but again, you've got to go with your gut. If you know in your nowhere God's asking you to shift and change, or you see all the writing on the wall, like you best be shifting and you best be making some changes. I did do a podcast one time about when you're supposed to be changing and you're not. A lot of times God will he'll pluck you right out of a situation. And that's tough. I remember when I was supposed to be leaving corporate America and I just didn't. This was, back in my late 20s. And so God allowed me to be laid off. And it was in his goodness that he did that so that I started being an entrepreneur. However, I was plucked out of that situation. You could either leave on your own, make the change on your own, or God will make it for you sometimes. And that was rough. It was right, but it was rough. You know what I'm saying? Point number 8. If you are someone who's had a lot of burnout previously or a lot of trauma, and doesn't have to be business trauma, definitely personal trauma affects business decisions, then sometimes you adopt this mindset that's like, never again. I'll never again be in that situation. And this is a really like self-protective response that'll definitely hold you back if you're needing to make some changes and some shifts. So when women are in my coaching groups, I'll tell them like, tell me your experience, some of the bigger things, lessons that you've learned through different experiences. And often that is something that shows up in their unwillingness to shift and change. They just got out of a really bad marriage. So, internally they're like, I am never again going to get myself in a situation such as da, 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 da. Maybe they've had to declare bankruptcy in a business prior to the one they're now building. Never again am I going to find myself in this, maybe they've had a really bad business partner. And so they're making almost like internal vows, which is very dangerous, by the way. I could do a whole podcast on that. But when you have those types of internal conversations with yourself, I will never be like my father, or never again will I get myself in this situation. Those are some dangerous words, even just to be thinking. But again, I could do a whole podcast on that. But a lot of times, if you've been through extensive trauma or burnout, you don't want to make any shifts or changes because the last time you made some decisions turned out they were big decisions and they were not the best decisions. And now you're still trying to heal out of those decisions. And now making a change in your business feels like another decision, and you're in no place to make any decisions and not trusting your decision-making skills. That might land for some of you. And the last reason that sometimes women do not make changes that they need to is because they lack clarity or the 5-mile vision. And so for so many people, not knowing what's next feels the safest or knowing what's next feels the safest. So not knowing what's next feels like the absolute opposite of safety. It feels terrifying. And so I think so many times we get wrapped up into the, I'm just going to pray. I'm just going to pray. I'm just going to, God's not telling me what he wants me to do. I'm just going to wait on God, wait on God. And I think that's great. Okay. I think there is a time that God says, wait on me. I think there are other times that in your knower, it's time to make some shifts. It's time to make some changes. You don't trust yourself to make good ones, and you don't trust God to take care of you in spite of yourself. And what you're wanting is the reassurance and the 14 people giving you confirmation, and God to give you a vision at night when you lay your head on the pillow, and for an angel to visit you in your dreams, and to know in your knower that the change that you're making is about to be a really good one and the right one. And if it doesn't come, then I think so often we don't want to make any changes, because what we're wanting again is that perceived safety of confirmation. And so often, at least this is how God works with me. This is how God parents me. Jen, we're going to make this next right step. Okay, we're going to make that step. Okay, Jen, we're going to make the next right step. Okay. Alrighty. Okay. And I'm asking God, what am I going to be doing in 5 years? And God's like, worry about the next thing I've got for you. Okay, here we go. Next right step. Last week, my friend Bethany Ricks was in Kansas City, and she was speaking at Kristen Farrell's Not Your Mama's Bible Study live event. Kristen's a friend and client of mine. And Bethany was going to be speaking at her event. And so Bethany and Carrie Rabina and I all went out for breakfast, and we hung out. And by breakfast, I mean, we hung out for like 4 hours together. It was amazing. But Bethany was telling us that her father had some good advice when they were all growing up, which is when you don't know what to do, just ask God, what is the next right step? And when you feel like you know what the next right step is, then you make that decision, and then you pray about the next step. And then you make that decision, and then you pray about the next step. And you make that decision, and you pray about the next step. And so she was essentially helping me out here on my podcast notes without knowing it, because so often we want God to give us the next 10 steps before we make any changes. And God usually, in his goodness, doesn't do that. And so often women feel safer because they just don't know what's ahead. They lack the overall vision. And so they don't want to make change. And so to kind of finish up here for today, we need to have a new way that we view change as women in business. We need a reframe. And if you follow me for any length of time, you'll know that I used to do a life coaching class called Reframed. I love that word. It's just basically, it supports the Bible scripture about to take every thought captive and to make it line up with the word of God. Like, how are you going to take that thought about what change equals? Because so many people think that change is bad. And so many people think that change is hard. And yes, change can be hard, but hard doesn't mean bad. And so how can we help ourselves to make change not equal bad, and to make change just equal something different in our mind so that we're not so terrified of it? Because change doesn't have to mean failure. Change doesn't have to mean you've messed up. It can mean that you're following the Lord's direction. It can mean that you're foreseeing changes in your industry. It can mean that you are now a forerunner. And again, if I look at back to a couple of years ago when we decided to white label software, and that was a timely, over 6 months in the making, that was a lot of back and forth. That was a lot. It was a heavy load for my team. And it was, a financial risk on top of that. We were white labeling software to offer to my clients. And I did that at the suggestion of a coach, by the way. But I did it because the coach suggested it. And I also knew in my knower where the coaching industry was headed. And I knew that as people get out of so many groups, so many coaching things, and as people, so many people who thought maybe they wanted to be a business owner in 2020, 2021, when everybody was at home, now they're realizing it's not really cut out for them. I realized that there might not be as many people who are needing coaching, but for business owners who have started a business, they're always going to need an email list. They're always going to need a website. They're always going to need a landing page. I knew that coaching is just not as sticky as what software is. And so people are always going to need tech for their small businesses. And so was it a big risk? Absolutely. Am I somebody who's willing to take some big risks? I am, for all practical purposes. But I also have trained myself and trained my brain not to think of change as bad. And so I want to help you with that on next episode on part 2 of this. Okay. On part 2, I'm going to talk about how to actually make the change. What mind shifts do you need to adopt? I'm going to give you an example of one of my business coaches who taught me not only with words, but just led by example. We're also going to talk about the gazelle, one of the animals that is, I'm going to give you some pictures, word pictures, mental pictures of gazelles and why they're able to like outrun, outlive, outwit like cheetahs, which are even faster than them. I give you some good examples. I want to help you figure out how you can force yourself to make change and not see change as a bad thing. Because for a lot of you, change this year isn't something that you maybe just should do, but it's going to be the only thing that's going to keep you alive in your business. If your business is going to survive, it may be only because you are requiring of yourself to make some changes in 2025. So that's going to be in part 2. This was episode 533. That's going to be 534. It'll be coming out 2 days from now. I hope that this was helpful. If it was, here's what I want you to do. If you've never left the Jennifer Allwood Show a review, if you'd go do that, that would be just amazing. I think we have maybe close to 2,000 reviews right now. Would love that. And of course, only if it's a great review. If you hate my hair and you're watching on YouTube, or hate me, like no need to comment, no need to comment. But also send this podcast to some people that you know who are in business. Because if you're a business owner, you know other business owners, and there are some business owners who are knowing they need to shift right now. Just forward this episode to them. I hope it will be a blessing to them. And I hope I'll see you on part 2. All right. We'll talk soon, friends. Bye-bye. I need paper. Lord have mercy. I'm so hot. How was it? Part 2 coming soon.